Hey there, baseball fans, and welcome to the latest edition of Coffee and Curveballs. I'm your host, Nathan Rohde, and joining me as always is our esteemed national cross-checker, Shooter Hunt. Shooter, we got a great show for everyone today, as we do every week, I think. But a lot of preseason events have happened in the last few weeks. You know, obviously we had the Super 60 last week, and we talked a lot about that, but we're going to go into some more state-specific stuff on this episode. I myself went to North Carolina. You were in the Northeast. Not to mention California recently, so we'll have lots to talk about.
Yeah, baseball is in the air, so I am jacked up right now. I got my Coffee and Curveballs t-shirt on. Life is good. You know, we did have those preseason events. We got opening day coming for the college season. Big tournament coming in Florida this week, so a lot of action kicking off the year.
Yeah, there certainly is. I'll be down at the preseason classic with our Florida guys. It's jammed packed. You know, we'll have a lot more on that. And to plug Florida real quick, they just released the Florida 15 today, which is their own little video show, and they talk about the preseason classic on there as well as some other things, so be sure to check that out. But speaking of Florida, our first guest today is going to be Doug Freeman, our Director of Scouting in Florida. He's joining us on the phone now. Doug, thanks for joining us today. Looking forward to chatting some baseball with you.
Nathan, Shooter, thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Dougie.
So, Doug, let's get right into it. A couple of weeks ago, you guys had the Florida preseason All-State event. Just tell us, you know, who was a top standout there for you, regardless of class, regardless of commitment, and who really shined on the day?
Yeah, there's a couple of them. You know, Rhodey, it was a really talented group from top to bottom. A guy that was pretty highly touted and has been on the rise coming in was Franco Ailman. And Ailman, as we mentioned on our thing as well, is a guy that continued to fill out. There's some long arm action, but he really gets down the mound. It was 91 to 93 on the day. Filled up the zone. The breaking ball's got some potential. It'll need to improve a little bit, but he's 6'6", 215, and there's still more room to grow. And you know, some of the other guys was a really impressive 20 class in general. I mean, you had guys like Dylan Cruz, who is, you know, in my opinion, the best pure hit tool in that entire class by. And guys like Alec Freeland and Luis Costello and just a really good Brandon Fields, a really good young core of players that were in the 20 class there that stood out both athletically with some present tools and with a lot of upside.
Now, Doug, I know there was a big name in the 19 class. You talked a little bit about the 20s, but Hunter Barco, #1 nationally for us at Prep Baseball Report. But Hunter Barco's there, did not pitch in this event, but played some first base, got to see him swing the bat. And for me, that's one of the big things that makes him one of those top guys in the 19 class is that athleticism, to be a two-way type guy. What did you see from him?
Yeah, well, if you just grade the tools out, I mean, you're talking an above average, you know, arm, obviously up to 95 on the mound, but just outfield wise. And if you're even take away the pitching ability, the kid's a potential draft pick with the bat. I mean, he's got real offensive potential, and that type of athleticism we've seen translate to the mound. The arm works really well. There's a lot of deception. The ball comes out of his hand unbelievably well from the outfield, from first base. I mean, he was throwing balls from first base to the middle infielders during the infield workout that were handcuffing the second baseman. I felt bad for the second baseman that got 92 running in on their hands from 80 feet away, and they're getting eaten up. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the kid, you look at bodies and you talk a lot about projection, you talk a lot about these things and these words that you hear of these top players, but you look at the kid's hands and his feet and his shoulders, and you're, man, this kid hasn't even scratched the surface of what he could be in 5 years. And the stuff right now is, above average to plus fastball and above average breaking ball. And he's just a above average all around athlete with a lot of room to fill out.
Yeah, there's a lot present, but there's a ton to dream on for Barco. And I know he's one that I can't wait to see. Once the spring gets going, I'm sure I'll be calling you up nonstop, seeing how Barco is doing. But like you touched on a little bit ago with the 20 class, Dylan Cruz, you and I have talked about him for over a year now. Just how well he performs on the big stage. And some guys may talk about what is his position, where does he play? Hey, guess what? If you hit, you don't sit. And Dylan Cruz is that guy who just continues to get hits off big-time pitching. What was he like?
Yeah, well, Well, like you said, he performs. The kid finds more barrels than anybody I've had a chance to watch, and you look at the similar. You've got Brendan Rogers, who went to Lake Mary High School, but as the shortstop. But you're talking a plus tool, and you look at these tools, and all of us go out and grade kids out, and you don't see too many true plus tools, and he's got a plus hit tool, and it shows up day in and day out against any arm, and it's something that. Like you said, if you hit, you don't sit, and the kid finds barrels over and over again.
And against big time competition, it's not time after time. Guys older than him, doesn't matter where he is, he seems to get hits.
Mm-hmm. We're all about catchphrases on this show. Spin wins. You don't hit. You hit. You don't sit. So that's another good one for the show. But Doug, real quick before we let you go here, tell us. With Ailman, what do you think the draft sense is around him? Obviously we still got, a few months to go, which is a lot of time when you're talking about the draft. But Florida, it's a deep class. It's not really, a lot of slam dunk guys at the top, but the depth is pretty good. Where does he fit in the conversation in Florida when it comes to the draft?
He's a guy, like I said, where you've got some present tools, but a lot that you can dream on. You can see him gaining a lot, and it takes me back to a guy just last year who, started off was kind of he was a known guy, but he wasn't really high on our radars, and that was James Marinan. And then all of a sudden he comes out, in March, and he's running his fastball up to 94, 95, and 96, and now he's 6'5", he's 215, he's athletic. There's a lot of similarities in the bodies. There's a lot of similarity in the arm action. Ailman's probably not quite as athletic as Marinan was, but Marinan was a guy who went off the top of my head. I think he was in the 5th to 7th round range around there. So I could see Ailman making a jump in velocity, being that 93 to 95 guy, and being a guy that gets up there pretty high. He's a guy that could be a 4th to 7th round type guy come the end of spring, come June. Because of that upside and the potential, and I think we're going to see it earlier rather than later.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Well, Doug, we really appreciate you joining us today. I'm looking forward to coming down to Florida, see the preseason classic with you, and obviously next week on Coffee and Curveballs, we'll be sure to talk about that quite a bit as well, because it's fixing up to be a really good one. So, Doug, thanks for joining us today, man.
Thanks, Doggy.
Yeah. Looking forward to having you down, Rody, and looking forward to that preseason classic. Talk to you soon.
Sounds good, man. So next up, thanks for Doug for joining us today. Excuse me, but next up, we're going to go to Gerry Shank, who is our director of scouting in Virginia, Maryland, and D.C. Just had a Mid-Atlantic Pro Case held in Richmond, and by all accounts, it sounds like I should have made the 2.5-hour drive to Richmond to check it out. But Jerry, I apologize for not coming, but it sounds like you had a great event. How did it turn out for you?
Well, first, thanks to Rody. Thanks, Shooter, for having me today. And we'll let it slide this time, Rody. Next time we expect you right there in the front lines. But it was a great day. We had about 25 kids from Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia in attendance, primarily 2018 players. We had a handful of underclassmen who we'll get into a little bit later because they were pretty impressive. Excuse me. But the first name that really comes to mind who I thought jumped out was when we got into the pitching portion was Jake Zebron out of Colonel Richardson High School. He's a right-handed pitcher, NC State commit. He was a late bloomer last year, made a commitment middle of summer. He was low 90s arm with a lot of projection, a high ceiling, and it was a lot of the same this year at the pro case, but he topped out 93, hit 94 on a couple other guns. It was kind of the consensus was 93. It's a bit old school in the delivery. It's a long, lanky frame. There's some pace or a slower pace to his delivery, but when the ball comes out, it's different. It's just a lot different the way that arm works. Another Virginia kid that stuck out was Seth Mayberry. He's a right-handed pitcher out of Dinwiddie High School and a Longwood commit. He was at an event last year, was a 86, 88 arm, and you saw that there was projection there, and he really got after it in the past year, put on some really good weight, looked like a man when he stepped on the mound. He set 90, 92 during the workout, showed the ability to spin it a little bit up to 79. It is with some effort, but he has made that really good improvement through the past year, and really got on the scene. I know a lot of the people there thought that he was somebody that was pretty impressive, and one that they had never heard before.
It sounds like with these pro cases, the idea is to get some of these guys in front of those scouts. And give them a preseason look, and what ends up happening is, and this used to happen with the Super 60 before it became such a big event, and all the top dudes came, but you'd get a look at that second tier guy that maybe you'd seen a little bit of the previous summer, and the scouts are like, I know of him, but do I need to go see him in the spring? And that's what some of these pro cases, like in the Northeast, in Mid-Atlantic, and again in North Carolina, which we'll get into in a little bit, but you feel like some guys really made that name for themselves, like the Mayberries and Zebrons of the world, with the scouts in that area?
Yeah, absolutely, and that was our ultimate goal, was to try to bring those kids up who, were maybes, who they might need to check on, that we can get them in front of them early so they can start to get, collect their data. And I think it was definitely a big help for them. Some other names too, like Hunter Hoops. He was 84 a year ago today. He's very young frame, and the arm all of a sudden just started working, and he's got some serious arm speed now, and he was up to 91 yesterday.
Oh wow.
I thought he was a big winner from the event. He's still got to learn how to spin it a little bit better, but that's me being picky. I think he can do it pretty well, but it's got to be a little bit harder. But he was really good yesterday. I think there's a lot of excitement about that player. There's an infielder out of Richmond, Gregory Ryan. He's a Pitt commit. He's a pretty impressive player. Good athletic body, quick hands. The hands just work really well. I think he made a very good case for himself yesterday, along with all the guys. I thought from top to bottom it was a very good event.
Well, Jerry, we've talked a lot about the draft here, but I like those underclass guys. So we're going to switch over, Rody. Sorry about this. But right off the bat, Jerry, the DeMatha kids. So DeMatha in Maryland, it's a historic program, and right now they got some of the best underclass players in the country, with Alex Green in the 20 class, Jack Bolger in the 20 class, and Thomas Keene in the 19 class. How did they look?
Oh, absolutely, and it's really silly how those three players are on the same team. And you can make a very good case that they had three of the top workouts on the day. Wow. Green he's really turned into a special player. From the outfield, 95, showing off the arm strength. On the mound, it was a pretty whippy, explosive actions all day from Green. And with the swing too, it's a short swing, but there's explosive actions all around. Bolger has one of the most aggressive swings that I have seen. It's just pure aggression, and he can whip that barrel through the zone, and he puts a hurting on the baseball.
You don't get cheated.
No, that is definitely true. And then Thomas Keene, he's the one. 2019, Bolger and Green are both 2020s. Keene, I thought, was very impressive on that workout. He does show two-way potential. At the plate, he's got some explosive juice that's coming out of his stick. He gets some. Sorry, I had a brain fart there for a second.
That's all right.
No, he did really well during the defensive portion. He probably is going to move to a corner if he sticks as a two-way. He does have some juice at the plate, and he had a nice carry during his BP round. But then when he got onto the mound, he just looked like a man. It was very controlled delivery, and the arm worked really well. Worked downhill, created some tilt on the baseball. Was up to 92 on the day.
Oh, okay.
Had a true 12-6 breaking ball with some bottom out action. It was really impressive. All three of those kids. It's amazing they're all on the same team.
Yeah, just seeing the video of Keene, he looked much bigger and more physical. Those broad shoulders, barrel-chested, definitely going to be an intimidating force in Maryland during the high school season on the mound. I mean, he and Green, because Green, I can't say enough about him. Loved him in Jupiter, and just to hear that he's continuing to progress, I mean, the sky's the limit for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're going to be a dynamic 1-2 combination. Green was really thrown to the wolves as a freshman. They play in a very tough conference, and he was, he had to do a lot of learning his freshman year. And I think he's really poised to have a big year for DeMatha going into his sophomore year, whereas Keene pretty much took the ace role throughout the year as the year progressed, and I think he's just going to continue with that. But they both are just impressive two-way players.
And just to let the guys watching right now, Green's a Virginia commit, Bulger's a Vanderbilt commit, and then you got Thomas Keene, who's a Duke commit. So this is one school in the Northeast, which is not rare. It's pretty rare to find that much talent concentrated onto one school in the Northeast. So they have a chance to be pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So another loaded crop for DeMatha, which is nothing new to anybody that really follows high school baseball. That team obviously just reloads in that region year after year. So, but Jerry, that was a great look at the Mid-Atlantic Pro Case. I'm sure you'll have plenty more on the event online at prepbaseballreport.com. But we appreciate you coming on for a few minutes today and giving us your thoughts.
Thanks, Shanker.
Shooter, thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Excellent. So, well, Shooter, let's move on now and talk a little bit about some of the events that you and I attended in the last few weeks. But for you, most recently, you went up to the Northeast, and it started out as a New England Pro Case, kind of ballooned from there and turned into like a true Northeast Pro Case. What did you tell me? It was like 9 states were represented.
9 states. It originally started with New England, but then all of a sudden Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, they kind of joined in with some of the top guys signed up for it. It turned into like a mini Super 60 in the Northeast. So I was jacked up to get there. And Rody, you know what? It was only, an 8, 9, 10-hour drive for you? You could have made your way up to that too.
Okay. Sorry.
But it was outstanding. And I mean, a week after seeing him at the Super 60, Dylan Lifrieri, a Connecticut kid, committed to Arkansas, he showed off the same stuff again. Ran really well. I think he was a 6.65 maybe. A couple of guys had him under 6.6. Big arm from the outfield, 93 from out there. Also did some infield work, which I think he can play just because he's so athletic. He can do some stuff in the infield if he needs to, but the outfield's probably where he sticks. You and I had talked about, hey, you can put him at center to start off because he's so fast, but the swing really works, and it's so athletic, and he just consistently drives the ball, and it's firm contact. The one that you wish you would have seen, so Rody, I'm sorry, another draft guy, Grant Levine.
Right.
We saw him down in Jupiter, New Hampshire kid, Rake Forest commit, and big left-handed hitter. It's about 6'3", 220, and I thought the swing looked even smoother. It was real easy power. We're inside a dome up in Connecticut, but the balls were bouncing off the dome, and it's just easy juice. And just watching the scouts, which there were about 15 or 20 pro scouts in attendance that got eyes on these guys, just seeing them like, hey, this is a kid we definitely need to see. So he could be shooting up boards throughout the spring, but he's a real player.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to follow him throughout the spring because, he made his rounds on the circuit last summer. So he's a known commodity, and everyone knows that the value is in the bat. He's got power, he can really hit, but living in New Hampshire, makes it really tough. It's a cold weather state. They get about 20 games in a year if they're lucky because of the weather. It's a very truncated schedule. So unless his team, travels, to Florida, it's going to be a very short window to get looks at a guy like that in the spring. So if I'm Wake Forest, I'm nervous, because he is such a good hitter and a known prospect. But at the same time, there are a lot of things working in their favor, like the weather and him being from the Northeast, especially being a Northeast bat, which kind of fight that stigma of they take a little longer to develop. They're not quite like arms where you'll roll the dice because they'll make that jump. The bats take a little longer. But Levine, if he ends up at Wake Forest, I can't believe the numbers that he would put up. It's a short porch in right field. So we obviously with that pull power, it could be pretty special. But he'll be certainly an interesting case to watch throughout the spring.
Yeah, talking with Dennis Healy, our New England scouting director, there were a couple balls he hit, and Dennis had coached at Wake Forest before, and I gave a little smile. Do you think that's out at Wake? And he goes, that's about 100 feet out at Wake. So, but like you said, it's tough in the Northeast. And talking with David Seifert, our college and draft expert, about a kid like that, what are you going to see during the spring against New Hampshire high school pitching that's going to make a guy like Levine really jump out at you? So with Wake's history and track record in developing those bats, I think he's got a pretty good chance to get down there, although it looked pretty good. I know those Northeast scouts were liking it. But those are the draft guys. I got one more for you that I really like, a kid named Theo McDowell. Now, he's we had seen him at the Future Games a couple years ago. He was a shortstop then, hockey player from Vermont, goes to school in Connecticut, but now pitching. And it's from a true three-quarter slot, even low three-quarter. It kind of slings out there, whippy. He's 6'5", looks like about $160. So it's still a lot to add to that frame. But he sat 86 to 89 with heavy sink. I felt bad for the catcher, Christian Fagnan. I said, how did you choose to catch this poor guy who's going to just destroy your thumbs for a while? But he's a tough kid. He was good with it.
Well, he's the son of a scout, so he should. I would expect so. Not just any scout, Ray Fagnan, who's a tough guy himself. So
exactly. I mean, Christian's like, of course, I was the first one who went up there. I got you. But Theo, I think he could be a mid-90s type guy in 3 years. Once he starts adding weight, gets on a throwing program. He's a West Virginia commit. He threw what I thought was a big-time slider, especially for a Northeast kid in February, throwing 75, 76, tight slider with some tilt. But just the way the ball came out, 86, 89, I was like, this kid's going to throw real hard real soon. So he's one for you to follow. Just a couple more. Zach Klapik, a kid out of Pennsylvania, catcher, swung the bat well, will be a follow. He's a pick commit. Could see him going to school. Justin Henry Malloy, New Jersey kid, corner infielder. I thought last year I saw him. He's a little banged up because he had hurt his wrist during the fall.
Right.
But he looked healthy, swung the bat really well. Has good action. He's an athletic kid, so there'll be some following of him. But it was a really good event, and the underclass guys who I got to see were really good. So next year for you, Daniel Baruch, Rhode Island, BC commit, really swings the bat, athletic at first base, can really play first base. And they can also hop on the mound. He's 81 to 84, left-hander, comes out well. I think he looks like one of those guys that goes to school as a Sunday starter, hits in the 3 or 4 hole. Matt Joyce, a 2020 roadie. This is maybe a little out of your comfort zone going down to the 2020s. But he's another BC commit, and I just was blown away by the bullpen. It was very mature, quick arm, real good feel for a 74, 75 slider, which is an out pitch, which I think can move into that swing and miss real quick. He'll be one we'll be following during the summer because I think he's going to continue to make jumps. And then Harold Call was an infielder from Massachusetts who New England doesn't produce those big-time infielders for the most part because it's too cold. They don't get the repetitions of Southern California. But he looked like a SoCal shortstop out there. Just the actions were really twitchy.
Interesting. So before you went to the Northeast and before the Super 60, you actually experienced a little bit better weather, I imagine, and you were at Arizona's preseason All-State event. Real quick, just tell us about a couple of the highlights from Jordan Banfield's event that he had down there.
Yeah, Jordan, stellar event, 80 kids. They had to cap it at 80 because there's just no more room with guys just banging on the door trying to get in. But it was at Arizona State, amazing complex. Ben Greenspan showed me around, assistant coach, recruiting coordinator at ASU. He got me good weather because I needed a little sun coming down from Portland. So thank you, Ben, for that. But some guys that stood out right off the bat, Colton Keith was a 2020 that we've been talking about for a while since he popped up. I think he's a legit two-way in a Power 5 program. He's 86 to 88, quick arm off the mound. But at the plate, I had seen big-time leg kick. It's uphill where some guys may be like, is he going to be able to do this, in a game? Because he's driving the ball. It's bouncing off the bat. It's, in BP. In game, it worked. And he adjusted with 2 strikes. So he's one where I was very impressed with his in-game work even when he fell behind. And then Gerardo Hernandez is 2019, who just popped up, and the barrel just seems to stay in the zone forever. He's, a slender athlete, about 6'1", 160, still growing into his frame, but the bat really plays. I think it was a 95, 96 exit velo, line drives, gap to gap, can run about a 6'7", 6'8", and he was 92 from the outfield, and it just looked the way it should. Went through the entire workout. I think he had 2 or 3 hits. Even when he made out, it was laser. But he's a guy I think could get some draft talk next year. And then a couple committed guys, a 2020 infielder, Hunter Haas, committed to Oregon State. And as soon as I saw that and watched him play, I said, this is what an Oregon State kid looks like. Just absolute grinder, getting after it. But the hands really worked in the infield. You could count on him to make the play. He's probably going to be third base, second base, shortstop once he gets to Corvallis, wherever he wants to put it. But in game, his at-bats were against some good pitching. He just felt very comfortable, especially early in the year. He's probably had no live at-bats. He was ready to go. And then a catcher, Cody Huff, committed to Notre Dame in the 19 class. He really produced on the day. Big arm behind the plate. Well, I think he was about a 1.9 to 1.95. So a good catcher going that way. And he's just, again, I talk about the maturity of these guys. He was confident the whole time. It was a quiet confidence, not a cockiness, just like, hey, this is how I go about my business. But he was really good. And then a couple arms just to throw out real quick in the 19 class who were uncommitted. Jacob Henderson, who real athletic, almost 3/4, could probably go submarine in the future, but pounded the zone, was quick to the plate from the stretch, and had that sweeping slider to counter it. So he's one that I don't expect to be uncommitted for long. And then Cal Lambert, a big left-hander, 6'3", 185. Everything smooth, looks the part. The breaking ball, I think, is going to be there because it showed some shape, especially early in the year. But I would expect a lot of guys to be following him throughout the spring. But it was an outstanding event. Jordan Banfield did a great job.
Excellent. Yeah, it sounds like it was definitely a great look at some of those Arizona guys, especially the younger crop. But for myself, this past weekend, I shot over to the Winston-Salem area in North Carolina to join Brandon Hall, our director of scouting in North Carolina, for his pro case on Sunday, so just a day after Jerry's event in Richmond for the Mid-Atlantic. And saw some really interesting players. It was really mostly the arms that stood out, although the hitters definitely held their own and made it, kind of showed the scouts that maybe they should get a look this spring. But for me, the arms, were really interesting, especially considering it's February. We're not expecting these guys to be full bore at their best or anything like that. And even then, there was some guys that were really standing out. Bennett Nance. Is a UNC commit. He was 84 to 86, but he's got that projectable frame. Shooter, you probably saw him at the future games. He's really got feel for that slider that came in at 78. He gets on the mound, and it's like, that's what I'm looking for. And before he even throws a pitch, and then when he does start throwing, it comes out easy. So he was that was a really good look for me with him. Jake Smith is right around the corner from me in Chapel Hill. I'll certainly try to get over there this spring, take a peek at him because he was 87-90, a really darting slider, and then a running changeup. He's got that long, skinny frame that hopefully he'll be able to add some weight to and see that velo tick up a little bit. Whether it's this spring or down the road, at UNC Wilmington.
Wilmington, good class there.
Yeah, Wilmington's getting some interesting players. Greg Jones made it to campus from last year's class. If Jake Smith makes it. They're good right now. They're an NCAA tournament team, but looking to make that jump. And, these are some guys that definitely could help out doing that down the road. Probably the most interesting guy to me was Baker Nelson, who I actually had never seen before. He's an NC State recruit. He was throwing about 89. It was coming out of his sleeve. It was a short arm action. And I was actually behind the mound for this one, but I imagine behind the plate, it would have been a really tough look for hitters. Then on top of that, he was throwing a really sharp slider. And Brandon Hall, was standing next to me, and I was like, man, that's really coming out of his sleeve. And it's, a tough look. And he goes, oh, wait till you see the slider. Sure enough, first pitch, slider, broke one off and, broke about a foot. And I was like, hello. So he's a guy that, I can look at a guy like that. It's a senior in high school and be like, he can step on campus next year and pitch out of the bullpen immediately. Just because, aside from the fact that the slider is really good in a swing and miss pitch, it's just a tough look. And it doesn't matter who you are. If you can't pick up the ball, it's going to be hard to hit. So that deception really helps his stuff play up. But then lastly, a guy that I know you're very well familiar with, Shooter, and that's Chris Villeman. One of the top 2019s in the state. I think we have him ranked number 2 right now. Pretty good athlete and, athletic frame, definitely looks like he's going to add strength as he gets older. On the mound, I think that's where his upside lies, but he's a legit two-way guy. But on the mound, athletic, the ball comes out really well. It's super easy out of his hand. And he was kind of 87-90, so obviously you're going to see a little bit more out of him throughout the spring and into next year as well. Secondary still developing for him, which not a big deal. Obviously, he's a junior. It's still early for him. But just the way that it comes out of his hand with how athletic he is, I certainly like the upside. But then at the plate, it was a balanced swing, really smooth path. So I know you've seen him, but definitely a legit two-way guy. I think NC State recruit too. So
he's pretty good.
He's not bad.
He can swing it. He's a good athlete.
But to wrap us up here, make me a little bit more jealous with the weather that you've had, and tell us about your little quick jaunt through California.
Yeah, I had some fun in Southern California for a few days. And so I got to see Notre Dame and Harvard Westlake practice. Now, Coach Dill, legendary coach at Notre Dame, home of Giancarlo Stanton and Hunter Green from last year. So watching them, Hunter Green's gone now. So the hoopla that last year brought with it, where, hey, Hunter's going to be a top 3 pick. Where's he going? We got these scouts, which can be difficult. They had a lot of freshmen on that team. So I want to get out there, see how those guys are doing. Since we saw them, most of them have committed, which is wild, but not when you see them play. Devin Ornelas, infield that I really liked last year. TCU commit. Shortstop, the hands really work. He's twitchy at the plate, left-handed hitter who can run a little bit. So good to see him. He's doing well. Dalen Reyes, UCLA commit. He'll be at second base. Those two, the tandem up the middle, it's going to be special. One of the better double play combos there. But Dalen looks bigger, more physical at the plate. I thought he swung the bat really well. I mean, it was just in DP, and they'll be getting going in games. But he's a guy who, with Hunter Green gone now, they're going to have that gap in the middle of the order. Dalen Reyes will be able to try and step into that as a sophomore. Tyler Stromsburg, and there's a bunch of pitchers there. I didn't get to see the arms throw, but Stromsburg came over, talked to him a little bit. USC commit. He's an arm that Les Lukacs really likes out there, who thinks going to make a big jump this year. And then Lucas Gordon, who obviously you saw at the Boris Classic on the mound, can really pitch.
Big time.
USC commit, but I got to see him swing the bat, and I think he swings the bat really well, too.
He does. He's definitely no slouch there. But you also got to see their big rivals in the Mission League in Harvard Westlake, who, I'm a big fan of. Jared Halpert there, obviously the head coach right now, but they're pretty loaded with 19s and 20s as well.
Yeah, and I just want to say both staffs are incredible. Those two schools, those are programs, and we talk about this a lot. Programs, they're practicing, the way they go about stuff, this is like a college team, the way they do things. And Jared Halpert was great. A lot of energy at that Harvard Westlake practice. And I didn't know they were rivals, so I was going in between. I looked like a traitor on both sides. But those games will be really heated because there's a lot of talent there. Right off the bat, 19, Vanderbilt commit, right-handed pitcher, big Sam Leboki. I know you're
my boy.
Huge fan. I mean, I watched him throw a bullpen. I was like, this kid looks like – this is what happens when you go to spring training. This kid's dotting with his fastball, throwing his breaking ball for a strike whenever he wants it, change up. It was just effortless going through where it wasn't – I'm not trying to impress. I'm getting my work in today. And he looks the part. He's 6'3", probably about 205 or so with room to pack onto that frame. But he'll definitely be their number one starter this year. And then 2 young sophomores, Pete Crow Armstrong, another Vanderbilt commit, can really go out and get it in center field. He may have a chance to play for Team USA this year as a sophomore. That's how well he does out there. Very confident kid. At the plate, quick, twitchy hands, just balanced throughout, driving the ball from gap to gap, getting his work in. And then Drew Bowser, Stanford commit, shortstop for Harvard Westlake. He just looks the part. When he steps on the field, you can say, who is that kid? And then in the box, they took BP all day on their practice field. Not many kids getting the ball out the left field as right-handers. Drew Bowser got the ball out. Those hands get through the zone with strength and power, and they're quick. But just watching the two of them go through their day, they can really defend, and their attention to detail at both programs, just the way they go about, going through picks and running situations and bunts, which is stuff we come to expect in California. They know how to play the game, and it's almost the point. I think they have a series, 3-game series, April 20th through 23rd or something like that. And I started looking at some Southwest flights down from Portland immediately because it just the atmosphere is going to be electric.
Yeah, it definitely should be. So that's a good look, at some preseason events we've had the last few weeks. Shooter, what's next on your schedule? What do you got coming up?
Well, I'm staying in the Northeast right now. I'll be at Jersey Future Game Trials this coming weekend, which is stacked right now. Just seeing the names come in and TJ just letting me know, hey, there's some dudes coming to this. And then right from that, I'll be headed to a New York downstate event, which has some more dudes. But from there, I get to go to Texas, baby. Get to see some of that Texas spring break action.
There you go. So for myself, as I mentioned before, heading down to Florida for the preseason classic, getting a little taste of that warm weather. And then after that, I've got a Georgia trip on the schedule, as well as Texas. I'll be following you up the week after, taking in some of that tournament action they have down in Texas. But Shooter, obviously great insight today. Thanks again for coming on, and thanks again to Doug and Jerry for telling us about their events in Florida and the Mid-Atlantic, respectively. As always, I'm Nathan Rohde. He's Shooter Hunt. This is Coffee and Curveballs. And until next time, we'll see you guys at the ballpark.